So chances are if you clicked on this video, or if you're 95% of the population, you don't understand how to glue your mix. And that's okay, because it's this weird thing, right? Where you might try to do it with compression, but then you can't really hear it. But then by the time you do, you've lost all the energy and excitement from your song. But that ends today, because I promise you this video is going to transform the way you mix, produce, and just think creatively. And if not, I want you to go back to this video in a few days, dislike it, unsubscribe. But if it does, I want you to share it with your mom, share it with your brother, leave a like, subscribe, because in this video, I'm going to show you first why it's so hard to get that mix bus compression sounding right, and then specific settings ranging from rock to hip hop on how pros actually glue your mix in a matter of minutes. Now you might be thinking, what's the catch? Well, I'm just going to be honest with you guys, you could be using this 10 minutes to watch TikTok. But before you click off of this video, I promise this is a better use of your time if you're actually serious about music. And before you ask, I don't have a course to sell you or anything, this is just straight value. So let's get right into the video. Okay, so a lot of the problems I see with mix bus compression actually comes from a lack of understanding of what compression really does to change the sound and make it sound up front or further back. Now, I just made a video explaining just that and how pros actually use compression, so I'll link to it in the video, but basically the same effect can be applied to mix bus compression as a way to attain that glue in the mix. Because here's what happens. When you have a fast attack and sort of a medium release, you really get that glue, but the problem is it turns into this thick sound that sounds really far back. Because what's happening is the attack is clamping down on that transient before it can even get through, and then the release is kind of taking a long time to fade back in for the next one. Contrast that to a really slow attack and a really fast release. That transient's letting through, and then the compressor is releasing in time for the next one. So you get that really in-your-face sound, but it comes at the expense of not having as much of that glue. So here's where we find our problem, right? If you glue it too much, it sounds really far back and a lot of that energy is lost. But if you try to make it sound up front and more energetic, you lose a lot of that glue. So what do? You really have to find a balance, and I'm going to show you just that. So first I'm going to show you the track without any mix bus compressing, and then I'm going to A/B it with how a pro might actually glue that mix together, and then kind of contrast that with how you often see people mess up when it comes to trying to glue the mix. Now, I know this compression stuff can be a little bit subtle and hard to pick up on, and you're probably asking, okay, well, how do I get a glued mix before mix bus processing? And I promise you those methods are right around the corner, but I'm going to keep this section as concise as possible so you understand that valuable framework about how to glue your overall mix as we move on to the more specific examples. Okay, so here we go, and remember I'm going to A/B it with that glue. So that sounds pretty great, and you might have noticed I use the SSL compressor, but where I see a lot of people mess up is in the degree to which they try to glue their mix together. Check this out. Let's say I have the same compressor, only this time I try to add more glue by putting the attack a little bit further and the release a little bit slower. Now, if we look back at our graph, we can see that this is really going to sound a little bit further back and probably less exciting. Here's how it sounds when I turn it on. So as you can hear, the song really gets pushed back, and yes, it sounds glued, but it sounds like more of this thick, less exciting sound. What that comes down to is the threshold, attack, and release not being set properly, and potentially the ratio being too high. Okay, so we know you can't put the attack too fast and the release too slow because it's going to cause that loss of excitement, but it's also important to not put that threshold too low because in that case, you're just compressing way too much. For example, look how much it's compressing when I engage the superior settings versus otherwise. So what you're seeing is with the threshold too high, you're getting too much compression. Really, all you need is a few dB of compression, and this is at a reasonably slow attack to let some of the transient through. And I put the release at auto because I thought it sounded great, but keep in mind, beyond just putting the attack slow enough to let some of the transient through and the release fast enough to get out of the way for the next one, you really have to keep that threshold pretty high, okay? Now, this might look different depending on your track, but really, you only want a few dB of compression. And with this, a lot of the of times people put it on 4 or 10, and 4 can be okay, but the higher the ratio, the more those exciting transients are tamed down, which can cause the overgluing effect I mentioned previously. Okay, so before getting into more of the fun stuff, I'm gonna quickly show you the most important aspect about getting glue in your mix. And now you might be thinking, is he being for real? Yes, I'm as sure as beach traffic in July, okay? The biggest problem in stopping you from getting that glue in your mix is not having the right volume balances. And yes, I mean these faders right here. Okay, I brought up this because it looks a little bit prettier, but watch what happens if I just turn up the volume of one of the tracks. It's gonna completely destroy the glue. So as you guys heard, by just turning up the drums 3 decibels, the glue and synergy between the instruments just completely fell apart. But that's why I stress it the most. You have to get the balance right. And this includes, believe it or not, the left and right channels, okay? If you have a lot of tracks and you're putting them all in the center, it's gonna sound way less glue than if not. Let me just show you how that sounds by converting everything to mono really quickly. So hardcore audiophiles might be quick to point out that's not literally the same as putting every track in the middle because of phase cancellations, but look, it's illustrative, and it really shows you that messing up the volume and stereo balance can completely remove the glue and excitement. But you might have noticed it still sounded pretty good. So this is where we get into the fun stuff of actually gluing your mix before any mix bus compression or anything like that. So to start out, I'm going to show you the 3 things you can do to really glue something together in your mix, and I'm going to begin by showing you these vocals where I actually used all 3 of these methods. So this is how it sounds without any processing on it.
Trust. Oh no, besides I'm going nuts, so it's one thing to be stir crazy, stuck.
And this is what it sounds like with all the processing.
I'm going nuts, so it's one thing to be stir crazy, stuck inside, feeling all hazy, but it gets better when you go outside. But you can't escape, go on, damn, I know I'm messy.
So firstly, you really need to get that EQ and compression on point. And I just made a video talking about how to get perfect compression, so I'll link that. But the reason I put them hand in hand is because they both kind of change the tone of the instrument, and that's really your step 1. You have to get both of those right, and I'm going to show you some EQ and compression settings for drums and bass, but I just made a video about that for vocals, so I'm going to start by showing you just what it sounds like and then move on to the other method for glue.
Trust. Oh no, I said I'm going nuts, so it's one thing to be stir crazy. Stuck inside, feeling all hazy.
So as you heard, it sounds okay, but it really doesn't have that glue yet, and the tone is still kind of off. So this is where the next part comes in. If you're having trouble hearing something in the mix and it really doesn't sound glued together, try adding distortion and saturation, okay? This is what it sounds like when I add the distortion.
Oh no, I said I'm going nuts, so it's one thing to be stir crazy, stuck inside, feeling all hazy.
So as you could tell, that really added clarity and glue to the mix. And to be honest, I used something like 7 or 8 different saturators and distortions for the vocals. So the way you use saturation can really differ based on the plugin, but basically what it does is it generates distortion across the frequency spectrum, or if you're using a multiband saturator, creates it within that band. It takes the fundamental key and then it creates distorted copies of it down the line. What that can be used for is adding energy and clarity where it's lacking. So around here, I noticed this band of something around 1.2 to 4.5 really needed some extra excitement. So I added this triode algorithm from Ozone, and this is what it sounds like.
Oh no, I think I'm going nuts, so it's one thing to be stir crazy.
And then I noticed it really needed some here too.
Oh no, I think I'm going nuts, so it's one thing to be stir.
So altogether, even though this saturator isn't even on the lead vocal, without it, it sounds like this.
Trust. Oh no, besides I'm going nuts, so it's one thing to be stir crazy,
And then with it, it sounds like this.
Trust. Oh no, besides I'm going nuts, so it's one thing to be stir crazy, stuck inside, feeling all hazy.
So as you could tell, it really added some of that needed clarity and brought some more glue to the mix. And then the last thing you can do to add glue to your mix through specific stem processing is to add delays and reverbs. So you're going to listen to it without delays and reverbs, and then I'm going to turn them on as we go.
Trust. Oh no, besides I'm going nuts, so it's one thing to be stir crazy, stuck inside, feeling all hazy, but it gets better when you go outside. But you can't escape, go on, damn, I know.
So you can really tell there's quite a bit when after I press pause, listen to how it sustains.
It's one thing to be stir crazy.
So you hear a lot of those delays, and the way you get that huge delay effect is by putting one at a faster time and one at a slower time. Sorry, this is slower and faster, and panning one completely left and one completely right. Without that, you can get more of an echoey mono delay, but if you want that big like verby delay, you really want to do that left and right trick. And I just made a video on that too, so I'll link that too. That adds a lot of value. And then of course you add the reverb, and that's gonna, you know, finalize the gluiness of the vocals. And for this, I used a small plate reverb. And another thing is you always want to put your reverbs and delays in a separate channel so you can kind of just slide them up as need be. Okay, this is what would happen if I was sliding this as I went.
I'm going nuts, always one thing to be sure, crazy, stuck inside, feeling all hazy, but it gets better when you go outside. But you can't escape your own damn mind.
Okay, so now we're gonna get into this. But before you see how I glued that together, I got a cool opportunity for you guys. Over the next 14 days, I'm going to select one mix that you guys send to this email, and I'm going to fix your mix in a video coming up shortly, okay? I'm going to put the details in the description, but this should be an exciting opportunity for you guys to see exactly how I would go through things step by step. And all I ask in return is that you like this video if you enjoy it, and that you comment that you entered your stuff, okay? So to start out, like I touched on earlier, you really have to get that EQ and compression right. So for the drums, these are the compressor and EQ settings I used. Yes, this is an old mix, so I'm using a fruity stock compressor. But in addition to that, I also used 3 instances of saturation that really add to the glue of the mix. But again, I really glued that kick into the mix by adding some excitement in the upper band of a multi-band compressor. So this is what it sounds like with the saturator versus without. So it's really using the exciter to kind of fill out that tone in the mix. Similarly, I use saturation on that bass, and this is something that can really help glue your mix when you're talking about that synergy between the kick and bass and just making the bass sound clear in the mix in general. And because this was a mix from a while back, I have some plugins on here that are probably unnecessary, but the saturation component still stands. So this is what the kick and bass sound like with saturation on the bass. And this is how it sounds if you take all of those off. Okay, now moving on to this track. So this video wouldn't be complete without showing you how to glue your kick and bass through EQ in the first place. So okay, for this, I really found where that kick sat, and it sat around 50 hertz. So then for the bass, I really just cut it out like more than 12 dB beyond 50 hertz, and at here it was 85. So by the time the kick comes in, they're not really clashing with each other too much. So for this last example, I'm going to show you how I use saturation on a less prominent instrument in this song. So without saturation, this pluck instrument sounds like this. And again, I really wanted some more of that clarity and energy, but I also kind of wanted some of that retro distortion, and that really brought out some life in it and helped glue it in the mix. Okay, so that's it for this video. I really wanted to show y'all how you can use saturation to glue your mix together. And yes, compression and EQ and balance is also crucial, but those are definitely talked about a little bit more. And this video is actually inspired by a comment on one of my previous videos. So if you found any kind of value in this, please like and comment what you'd like to see next. Again, make sure to send me one of your mixes because I'm going to show you how I would fix it in a future video. Thank you for watching. Like the video. Have a great day.